Border authorities are hoping that technology will help them keep a closer eye on our borders. The Border Management Authority is using drones to monitor the borders and says this has helped to intercept illegal crossings speedily. Over 13,043 travellers have already been processed, with close on 1,000 entering South Africa from Zimbabwe and 3,373 exiting the country. Newzroom Afrika is live for us now from the Beitbridge Border Post. Veronica, good afternoon again. I'm stuck in a time warp. All right, so you shared with us a little bit earlier just some of the closer details on how that drone technology is helping BMA officials there manage that port of entry. What else have you found out?
Well, Iman, as we were speaking in regards to the usage of tightening security, drones were definitely a part of it. We showed you some of those visuals, specifically that of the Limpopo River. And right now we are, in fact, live at the banks of this river, a natural, boundary that separates South Africa from Zimbabwe. Although this river is scenic, it's filled with much danger, both natural and man-made, infamous, of course, for its crocodile-infested waters. It remains one of those vulnerable crossing points for those attempting to enter South Africa illegally. At this time of the year, specifically when the water levels are usually lower, we know that this river becomes a busy passage. People wade across carrying groceries, cigarettes and other goods. But because of today's heavy rains, we've seen quite a slow activity somewhat. But still, if you take a close look, you can spot some of those boats on the far side that have already ferried some goods across. And of course, the other side, there lies Zimbabwe, a country obviously grappling with various issues from instability, from economic destabilization and collapse. But many other people use this specific point to come across. We heard as well from the BMA officials that this area specifically likes to pass through groceries and other goods that pass through here, specifically around illicit goods. And we know that this area is referred to as Ha Churundu. Now, we know as the Border Management Authority tightens its control, questions, of course, remain as to what needs to be done to tighten the border security here. I'm going to be joined now by the Border Management Authority Commissioner just to speak to us a bit about what actually happens around this area in terms of the vulnerabilities that we see, how it affects communities as well, and of course, the stretched resources of the BMA and how it's unable essentially to patrol this area despite its best efforts. Commissioner, thank you so much for your time. If you can, just walk us through what we are seeing here on the banks of the Limpopo River. We saw as we actually got here, as we were driving, there were already some boats in the water. Since we got here, there's been no movement whatsoever.
Yeah, no, thanks, Veronica. Maybe let's start by indicating that these are the challenges that we are effectively dealing with on a daily basis, worse of it on a 24-hour basis. As we indicate, this is one of the vulnerable segments, as we always describe it. This is kind of 10 kilometers east of Beitbridge Border Post, as it were. And of course, we have some other vulnerable segments, even on the western side, as it were. For example, the Maroi area. We will also go that side so that you can also have a feel of the nature of the issues that we deal with. So here is one of those areas where mainly, the people literally go to Musina, they buy groceries, and they avoid coming through to the port because obviously they need to do certain declarations depending on the quantity, and therefore they bring them this side. However, we still have deployments here in terms of the military, in terms of the border guards. But the difficulty is, because this is a 250-kilometer stretch, ultimately, when you have the forces on the other side, they use the other one. You have others on the other side, you have the other one. We do have drones now to be able to help us to see the situation. But unfortunately, because these are still the borrowed drones, as we said, they are not able to reach as far as here. So basically, they do 2 kilometers both sides, and they cannot reach 10 kilometers, as it were. However, we do believe when we get our own drones, which supposedly will get them during this year, we should be able to have a full coverage of these spaces and be able to do proper response in terms of dealing with these challenges, as it were.
And what makes this area specifically definitely so vulnerable? Is it because it's no man's land that we have no control over the movement that happens here? What leaves it so susceptible to those being able to move goods in and out of both countries?
Yeah, you see, the first thing is, if you check here, I mean, on the South African side, we do have this village here called Hachirundu, as it were. But of course, on the Zimbabwean side, just after that mountain, villages are now starting. So in instances where you have an area where there are villages closer to the border environment itself, that is where the vulnerability becomes clear or becomes practical, as it were. So again, if you look at the distance from here to Musina town, and of course from Musina town to Beitbridge, it's almost equal distance, as it were. Although from here to Musina is probably between 10-15 k's, from Musina to Beitbridge is around 10 k's per se. At the end of the day, the distance is more almost equal, and that is why it becomes also a bit easier for them to be able to come this side. And that is why you will see on that side, they're even using donkey cart for the purposes of moving those. Not sometimes they do have vehicles, but mainly is donkey cart, as it were. So these are the challenges. However, one of the biggest concern for us is the movement of illicit cigarettes, and that is why those are the effective focus areas that we have to be making sure that we are intercepting. The good thing is, in this particular area, we don't have much of problems in terms of the exiting of stolen vehicles. So on that particular basis, it's a bit of an area that we know the nature of the issues that we are dealing with, but there are not much issues relating to vehicle theft or smuggling per se.
Yeah. And earlier, Iman, if you allow me just to bring in a local resident here, the chief of this community, the BMA spoke about the need for a barrier at this point, saying that despite the fact that it is no man's land, there needs to be a barrier. And this is part of course, the infrastructure growth that is needed when patrolling parts of the Beitbridge border. But speaking there about the need for barriers, I'm joined by Ntadehia, who is the local chief of this area. For you, Ntadehia, you heard what the BMA has had to say, the authority. What are some of the issues that are facing this community here for you, and what more needs to be done when you look at just that fence that separates the two countries?
No, I understand that what has been said by our Honorable Dr. Masiapata is true. And as a community here, you will note that as per se, Achirundu, we are not only talking about this Zone A. We have made to lodge a claim in terms of the Restitution Act of 1994. Now, the same community of Achirundu. Now, usually, the nearby people, they go to Messina. You know the political situation in the other country. Now, we have a humanitarian crisis here. We need to have a humanitarian solution. By saying so, people can see groceries, soap are crossing, and then daily necessities are crossing, which means those people, if we think of the future, we had to help what is happening in the official port of entry at Beitbridge. This can become a smaller Beitbridge named the Chirundu Corridor, where you find that the custom people are here, where you find that all the segments of the departments involved, because we as people of Achirundu, we don't want to be part of the problem. We are seeing, when I come here, I have seen this happening. Now there is no fence. 37 million is gone without any clarity. Now we want our government to come to us because we sleep here. We have our life here. We know what is happening. But for the fact that cars are being smuggled cigarette, most of the people here, either even documented or undocumented, they know each other. Those people cannot risk and take chances. If you look there, you find fish oil. If you look there, you find soap. Now, by saying so, this needs a political solution. Why I'm saying so? The president from that other side, President Honorable Mnangagwa, and our CIC, Comrade Ramaphosa, they need to sit down and find something and do like what they are doing in DRC. We are seeing what is happening after the violence in Cabo Delta. Now there is disputes in our nearby east country, Mozambique. Now government, Sidini Mufama, they was there. Now why can't they go to Zimbabwe? Because their brothers, MK and Apla, guerrillas, they pass through here.
All right, thank you so much for you.
We want a solution in this one.
Absolutely. The resident here speaking about the fact that there needs a resolution, but saying that perhaps maybe to curb the illegal passing of goods that happened here, that they could consider building a bridge between here. But of course, you would know as well, resources are an issue. I can tell you, man, that while we are here, the waters are definitely still. But as soon as officials leave this area, activity takes place somewhere else. And of course, speaking to the inundation that is faced by some of these officials. Back to you.
Veronica Makhoali, thank you very much. A view there on the banks of the Limpopo River, positioned at the Beitbridge Border Post, where there is, of course, an escalation in people travelling across that border. We'll go back to Veronica later.